Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Out War. I am Turner, and I am sadly not joined in the studio with Rosie today. He's not going to be with us on this episode, so all of you Rosie fans are going to just have to wait another week until he gets back with us. But I do have Rachel. Rachel, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
How's the weather down in your neck of the woods?
It's Florida, meaning we have a random thunderstorm almost every day, and trying to beat the heat. If it's not the heat, it's the mosquitoes, but no gators where we are. It's the mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah. You get manatees where you are, right?
I think there are manatees. It's mostly black bears and armadillos, though, honestly.
Wow. That's an interesting combination there. But
yeah, we don't have ground.
Okay. Black bears and armadillos. And you don't have scorpions? Do you guys have those down there?
You know what? I haven't seen any, no, but we've got some massive diamondback rattlesnakes.
Wow.
And all kinds of nice water snakes, jellyfish, sharks, hammerhead, you name it. We've got the sea life and we've got the Texas wildlife, it feels like. But no alligators, which is disappointing because you think Florida and you think alligators.
Yeah, I think you have to go south central side to get that down in the but yeah. So yeah. So we're going to take a break from our Freemason series that we've been doing on the Freemasons and their ties with the origins of the United States or of Washington D.C. and all that stuff that we've been doing. And we have a special guest in the studio that I'm going to introduce in just a minute. But since Rosie's not here, I'm just going to go ahead and say, sit back, grab a Kahi coffee, and enjoy.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
That's right, Warriors. It's another episode of All Out War, and we're here. We have a great episode today. It's gonna be so cool. And for people that are, new to us, we try and cover multiple, angles of life. In particular, we keep it in three basic categories of theology, culture, and politics. And this one's a little different because I think it's going to fall along the line somewhere between culture and politics. It definitely has a theological bend to it, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But I have in the studio with us a special guest. It's a good friend of mine, Jay Blevins. Jay, how are you, man?
Hey, I am doing well. I am COVID-free, and I have plenty of toilet paper at my house, so I am doing very well, thanks.
I don't doubt that you have plenty of toilet paper.
We've got enough to last a little while, so
yeah.
We can have a party later on. If you
That's
like.
good, man. We'll go TP some people's houses just to show off a little bit. But so Jay, my friend Jay here is a prepper. And that's just the best way to put it is you're a prepper, but you're not just any prepper. You have been, and if anybody has watched any television in the last 5-10 years, they would recognize your voice probably on the air. But if they saw you, they would say, "Oh, I remember that guy," because you were on National Geographic, Doomsday Prepper. And you can also be found on Netflix on the Dark Tourist episode 8, where you were featured in there as well on Netflix. So I want all of our listeners to go check those out. I happened to catch your Doomsday Prepper, one of your Doomsday Prepper episodes just a few weeks ago on TV. We were watching it.
Nice.
And I had the kids. I was like, "Hey, we know them. They used to live in our neighborhood."
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We filmed with them back in. That's an interesting story in and of itself. But first, I just want to. You mentioned Kahi Coffee. Is that your sponsor?
Yeah,
dude, that's awesome. So when you see me on Doomsday Preppers or on the other show, a lot of people think I'm Hawaiian. So I like that you got the Hawaiian coffee going. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's the Nat Geo story is pretty interesting. So back when Doomsday Preppers first came on, I watched the first season and I thought it was interesting, but I thought a lot of the folks that were on there were kind of out there, not really kind of normal folks seemingly. And so I actually wrote to them and said, "Hey, I like your show, but there's preppers out there that are not necessarily, far out there, kind of crazy. And so they wrote back and said, okay, well, what do you do? And explained who we are and what we do. And they basically said, well, we're casting for the second season. And that's how that all worked out. So
so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because not only do you have a vast experience and you're knowledgeable, you also have a background and history with law enforcement. And this ties into a lot of what's going on in our culture right now.
Sure.
I mean, we don't have to go deep into this, but this whole defund the police nonsense. I still know a handful of police officers today, and a couple that actually work downtown DC, and they're just like, their arms are thrown up. They're like, we don't even know what to do because we can't even deal with criminals the way they need to be dealt with because they're basically handcuffing the police. Sure. And anybody that does anything that remotely looks like they're being rough or tough or enforcing the law, you're automatically going to, just get attacked or fired or somebody's filming, obviously. But what's your take real quick just on some of the defund the police stuff? Have you thought much about it?
I definitely have. And my heart goes out to the folks that are the men and women that are still in law enforcement, for that very reason. It's a tough job already. It's a thankless job already. 1 minute, you're having a nice evening where, it's a nice quiet evening. And then the next minute, you're fighting for your life. And so I think a lot of that is really misunderstood. What happened to George Floyd? There's not a law enforcement officer out there that's going to say that wasn't an injustice. Of course, that was an injustice.
Right.
Of course, that was a tragedy. No question at all. But what is happening with the movement to defund the police, it's madness. I mean, we can't operate without a police force. We cannot, as a society, look back in history. I'm a student of history. I like to look back at things that have happened in the past to try to figure out, kind of where we are now, where we're going. And the reality is that there's always going to be evil people out there. There's always going to be criminals out there. And so we need some sort of organization that's going to be able to take care of that. And so the movement to defund the police, I think it's madness. Are there areas for reform? Sure they are. But a lot of the stuff out there, I think is definitely getting blown out of proportion. The law enforcement officers I talk to now, they say that actually, on the media, you'll see, that, everybody hates the police. They want to defund the police. But a lot of the people out there that aren't on the news, that aren't the media, are very thankful for them being out there. And that's from people that are still in law enforcement today. And so I think most of the public understands the need and appreciates it.
If you're not a lawbreaker, then the law doesn't scare you, right? You have nothing to be afraid of. Like Roman says, the one in authority is there for a reason. And if you're not breaking the law, then you don't have anything to worry about.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think most people that live in even in the really bad parts of towns and cities, I think they want some level of authority there. Right. Because they just can't do it themselves, But I think it's I could go on a soapbox, but I think it's part of a bigger agenda plan that's unfolding through to try and break down our society and bring out something new that they want, create chaos, and then out of the chaos comes some kind of order, but that order is not what anybody wants.
And then I think I would look at the big cities and I would say the most violent cities, 19 out of the 20 most violent cities, who runs them?
Right.
Who runs them? And so if you're asking if there's a leadership problem, maybe it's because those cities have historically been run by Democrats.
Right.
And maybe that's where you need to make the change. Just saying.
Right. Yeah, no. Look, that's not a stranger on this podcast. We're pretty vocal about that. We're very conservative. But so out of law enforcement, I think you probably were just exposed to a part of culture that is just very dark and depraved. And is that what kind of keyed you into beginning to look into prepping and getting yourself and your family more prepared for something that ominous,
Sure. Again, I'm a student of history, so law enforcement definitely played a part in that. I became a law enforcement officer right before 9/11 happened. So I went to patrol. I was involved in SWAT and some special ops. And so, yeah, seeing that side of society, absolutely. I think gave me a more heightened view of what's out there. But really, it was large events like September 11th, like the tsunami that hit Christmas of 2004, I believe, or 2005, the one that hit Southeast Asia. And I mean, they don't even have a solid number on how many were killed, but it was around 500,000. Events like that, of course, Katrina, of course, Hurricane Sandy, you know, the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. You know, there's so many events that have taken place. I mean, just even if we just go back just to the year 2000 and look at the major events, the major earthquakes, you know, there's some people, thankfully, they've been blessed, they've been fortunate never to have to go through anything, and that's great. But hundreds of thousands, millions of other people have dealt with these emergency type of situations. And so seeing those things, having been in law enforcement, I've also been involved in the war on terrorism. Yeah, those things definitely led me to, I would say, at least focus on a little more and ask the question, why is it that it seems like so many people are unprepared for these types of events?
Yeah. What would you say the answer to that is? Why are people so unprepared?
I think because they live their lives as long as they can get their latte, as long as they're comfortable, as long as they've got their Wi-Fi. I think they're kind of oblivious to the other things that are going on. And I think it is also because we live in an age where, I mean, life is easier. You know, our parents, our grandparents, they were preppers, but they didn't call it prepping.
Right.
They just, you know, they grew their own food, right? They had their own garden. They canned their own vegetables and stuff. It was just a part of life coming from the Depression era, coming out of things like World War II. But again, a student of history, and I wanted to point this out. We may touch on it more later. But look at the history of this nation. And from the time we became a nation, 1776, we declared our independence. Every 80 to 85 years, I don't know if this is something you've looked at, but check this out, Turner. Every 80 to 85 years, we have had a major, for us, society-changing event. So go from 1776, 80 to 85 years, you got the Civil War, right? Mm-hmm. More Americans died. A lot of people don't know this, but more Americans died in the Civil War than any other war that we've been involved in. Fast forward another 80 to 85 years, World War II. Obviously, that was a world-changing event. A lot of the things going on now were because of the aftermath of that. And now where are we? We're really close. The end of World War II. Depends on if you go by the beginning or the end of World War II when we got involved. But 80 to 85 years lands us pretty much from 2021 to 2025. Yeah. And if history repeats itself, that means something major is possibly coming.
Wow. Yeah. I think you're right about just the ease, especially in America, you know, because this podcast, by the way, is global. We have listeners in Australia and Africa and all over. Anyways.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So good day, mates. But we, in America here, we definitely have ease. Even those that are some of the poorest in our country have it better than third world countries. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so I think the ease of our prosperity and our blessings in our nation has lulled us to this false security and unpreparedness. So I think that there's something to that for sure. You know, I don't disagree with that in any way. I totally think that's probably what you're like spot on that, which makes me nervous because I don't know how prepared I am, man. You know what I mean? So this brings me to the next point that I wanted to bring up. And Rachel, you can cut in at any time. I'm kind of dominating. I apologize there. But a lot of I had a conversation, I preach every now and again, and I was preaching last week, and someone came up to me and asked me, about preparing. They just happened to notice the temperature of the culture and just the way our society seems to be continuing to break down. And actually the police was a big part of it because that's what people depend on, that thin blue line, to hold back all anarchy. And they were just seeing it just kind of crumble and just like complete anarchy, as I was saying. And they were wondering, is it right for me to do this? Am I being selfish? Am I being fearful? There was just a lot of conflicting emotions that were connected to the whole concept of being prepared. Sure. And I don't disagree in any way with prepping. I think we should all be prepared. I mean, if you can, save money. If you can, I'm the type of person which I'll drive my car until it literally can't go anymore. That's just how I am. I don't need a new car every 3 years or whatever, like people, I mean, I can't afford it, but, so when this person asked me this, I think that they're they're questions that I think a lot of people are asking.
Sure.
So let's start there.
Okay.
And
let's look at two different perspectives. Let's look at the historical perspective, because I do think that's important. And then let's look at the theological perspective on preparedness. So historically, starting with right now, if you go to FEMA's website, what do they tell you? They tell you should have some stuff prepared. And if the government's telling you to be prepared for 2 weeks, you should probably be prepared for 2 months or 2 years. Okay. The reality is, and we saw this during Hurricane Sandy, the Northeast got hit by Sandy, remember, in I believe it was 2013, and then they got hit by a nor'easter. And if you went to the local office of FEMA, there was a note on the door that said closed due to the weather. So the reality is that people have come to depend so much on some sort of government intervention that they don't understand that the government, their first job, they're going to take care of themselves so they can continue to operate, whether it's local, state, or federal. And then if they have the resources and the time, then they're going to go out and help everybody else. But for whatever time period that is, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks or, my goodness, 2 months, in some situations like Hurricane Andrew, that wasn't that long ago, you're going to have to be able to survive for that long. And so my question to people out there, skeptics out there, would be, what are you prepared for? Okay. Everybody out there has car insurance. You mentioned your car. Everybody out there has, or a lot of people out there have life insurance. They have medical insurance. Okay. They have homeowners insurance. Why do we have those things? Insurance is a form of preparedness. We have those things just in case I get in an accident, just in case, God forbid, lightning strikes my home, just in case I fall down and get hurt. We don't call people crazy for having insurance, right? Insurance is just preparedness. Right, yeah. And so when we talk about preparedness sort of for emergencies and things like that, I know a lot of people in their mind get this image of, people with, I don't know, whatever, tinfoil hats and living in a bunker somewhere. And, that's not really the case. Again,
actually, that sounds kind of cool to me. I'm not going to lie.
But we just, again, harken back to history and times when we've needed to be self-sufficient. So that's the historical part. Let's talk about the theological part. And this is something I especially for American Christians, I think is difficult. Why? Because of the prosperity gospel. There are churches out there that literally teach that if you don't drive the Mercedes and you don't live in a big house and you don't have the trophy husband or the trophy wife or whatever it is, there's literally churches out there that preach that you are not a good Christian if you're not wealthy. And that's not found in the Bible that I read anywhere. Right. I mean, I read more about persecution and things like in hard times we might go through. But let's talk about that, because I do believe there are times in the Bible that God miraculously provides for people, right? We should 100% trust in God for all of our needs. I do believe that. Yeah. And there's times where God miraculously provided, right? Elijah, the folks in the wilderness, when Jesus was teaching the 5,000, the bread and the fish. So there are times in the Bible when God provides miraculously for his people, man in the desert, all of those situations. But there are also times where God leads people to prepare in order to survive. Noah being the first example. He literally prepared for the flood to survive. Yeah. And the big one, and this is one that I've shared with folks lately, and the verses that God has been putting on my heart over and over and over again. I will never, by the way, proclaim to be a prophet or somebody who knows the things that are coming. Again, I study history and I study the Bible. But Genesis 41 has been on my mind and on my heart lately a lot. Genesis 41, for those of you who might not know, Turner knows, of course, he's got the Bible like the back of his hand, but it's basically where Joseph's dream, or Joseph interprets the dream of Pharaoh. And of course, it's the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. Yeah. And I point people to this part of the Bible because a lot of times when they talk about, we don't need to prepare anything. So there was a bad famine coming. Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh. Pharaoh and Egypt prepared for 7 years because there was a famine coming and they had to survive it for 7 years. Okay. If that hadn't happened, the nation of Israel, remember Joseph's brothers had to end up coming down to Israel to survive.
That's right. Yeah.
If that hadn't happened, if Egypt hadn't prepared, being led by God in this dream, the nation of Israel would have died. Yeah. So God literally preserved the lineage of the Messiah, the nation of Israel, through a prepping event. Like, think about that for a second. Not one where could God have provided miraculously? Yes, he could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he led them to prepare. And so if somebody was to say that's not biblical, well, it is there. And also in the book of Luke, I believe it's chapter 22. I'd have to look up the verses. But in the book of Luke, where Jesus talks about the swords, at one point he'd sent out the disciples, and he sent them out, the 70, to go into the different villages and to preach. And he said, hey, when I sent you before, I sent you with nothing, right? Not a bag, not a purse, nothing. But now if you go, grab a coat, grab a purse. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have a sword, I want you to sell something to buy that sword because you need it.
Yeah.
Now, what was Jesus saying? Before I provided for you miraculously, but now you might be coming across some events where you need to be prepared. So if you want to argue with Jesus, feel free. But that's how I look at it from the theological perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's totally right. I mean, like the Noah story is amazing because God knew what was coming down the pike. He knew the rain was coming. He knew that there, judgment, and he gave plenty of time to prepare for Noah. And the same thing with Joseph. He had the dream with plenty of time to have good abundance where he could set aside, during the times of prosperity. So what do you say to someone now who's not even started and they're like, okay, how do I start? What do I do? I don't know. I think our listening audience, based on some of our Spotify stats and what I get from Apple that I can depend on, that I think I can depend on, is that they're mostly in the younger categories, in the late 20s up to about mid 30s. So they're like, I'm almost 50. Most of our listeners don't know that because I'm just so cool and young sounding, right?
That's right.
I'm just kidding. When we start doing YouTube with videos, my wife's laughing in the background. She knows I look like Santa with my gray beard. But what do you say to a younger person? Maybe they have a couple small kids, and maybe even the conversation with their spouse is going to be a little awkward. How do you give some coaching through that?
Sure. So at the end, or maybe later on, we can throw out some resources that I would use, but really look at it from a practical perspective. Look at events like Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. Look at Hurricane Andrew. Look at Puerto Rico. Okay, they got hit by a hurricane and then got hit by earthquakes. Some of Puerto Rico, which is a United States territory, right, was out of power for a whole year. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so for those who haven't been through a situation like that, what I would say is just do some research and read about, like in my book, the very first thing in my book is a firsthand account of a person who survived Andrew.
Okay, let me pause it. I didn't mention your book, so let's talk about your book real quick. Sure. What's the title of it?
It's called Survival and Emergency Preparedness Skills, or SEPS, and that's the name of my company, SEPS LLC. And it's a very basic foundational, I should say, guide if you've never looked into preparedness. And it starts out with a guy who lived through Andrew and what he experienced. Wow. So I break it down pretty simply. It's not a very long book. It's got a journal in it, but if anybody needs to get a copy, we'll put some stuff up later on how they can do that. But bottom line is, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? What do we need to survive? We need food, we need water, we need shelter, and we need protection. But before any of that, those are the physical things that we can do to survive. But before that, where does it start? I believe it starts up here. I'm pointing to my head, and here I'm pointing to my heart. Yeah. Where does preparedness start? Well, first of all, if you're not ready for eternity, that's the first thing you have to prepare for.
Right, yeah.
You absolutely, the only way to be reconciled to God is through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm not apologetic about that. I actually share that wherever I go. I've shared it on TV. We've shared it on the internet to millions of people. And, we're not apologetic about that because we don't think you can be prepared if you're not prepared for eternity. So that's the first part. And then the second part is the mental aspect, because really what you're asking is, so for these folks that are, 20 years old, younger, that have never been through anything, they've had kind of a cushy, easy life, and now there's all this unrest. I have a friend in Chicago right now, literally this morning, woke up to 20 shots fired outside of his nice apartment. They live in a nice part of town, and literally had to wake up and ask if his wife had been hit. Wow. Right? Think about that for a second. Yeah. So for a person who's never been through that, it's hard for them to say, okay, what if these things aren't available? What if toilet paper is not available? What if all these real things aren't available? And so really it starts with the mental aspect. And it's the question to ask is, can I survive any and every situation? Okay. So start there. And then from there, you have to start looking at your basic needs: food, water, shelter, and protection. If I can't get to the grocery store, I got hired by Paramount Pictures when I remember the World War Z movie came out.
Yeah.
And so they hired us. Kind of funny story, but long story short, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie wouldn't appear at the sneak peek in DC because of the political aspect of it, right? So they found us, and we went up there and we did this kind of Q&A right before the movie came out. It was a lot of fun. This one lady in the back, it was basically a mix in the theater of, it was like half, VIPs and media, and the other half was open to the public. And this nice lady stands up in the back of the theater and she says, Mr. Blevins, I just have a question. I agree with what kind of the stuff you're talking about, but how much food do I need to survive? That was her specific question. How much food do you need? I'm not trying to be smug or snarky or anything, but my question back to her was, well, how long do you want to live?
Right, simple question, simple answer.
Right? If you want to live 3 days, have 3 days worth of food.
Right.
If you want to live 3 weeks, have 3 weeks worth of food. And so when we talk about those things, you ask for a starting point, spiritually, mentally, and then those 4 things: food, water, shelter, and protection. Will you be able to get those things if there's no grocery store to supply it, if there is a run on supplies like you were talking about earlier? If there's no water, do you live on town water? We do.
Yeah.
So I have a catchment system to catch the rainwater at my house, right? Shelter, of course, is your house, but if you have to leave your house, where are you going to go? And last but not least, of course, protection. Because again, the reality is there are wolves out there that are going to, every single emergency situation, every single big disaster, if we look at, again, Katrina, all the ones I named earlier, there's always good people that rise out of it to help others, but there's also always evil people, wolves that will prey on the others. And starting with those things, I definitely would say, at least if you're willing to ask the questions, what would I do to survive and how long could I survive? I think you're already on a good road, and we can definitely help if you need more.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna put links in the show notes to connect with you on Facebook and your book and all that stuff. But and I would recommend, if you're thinking about this and chewing through it, you should get in contact with Jay and buy his book. Evidently, you said don't buy it on Amazon because it's like $70 or something like that. Yeah, again, there's opportunists out there that are selling signed copies and stuff. Don't do that. If you need it, if you need a copy, get in touch with me. Turner will put the way you can do that, and we'll get you a copy if you need one. But really, if you actually go onto Facebook, I've got all that stuff listed on there as well. Cool. Okay. Good. Yeah. Rach, you want to kick in here on anything?
I have some questions about, I guess, like, first steps for a newbie. Like, obviously that list of the basic needs is something really awesome to look into. But, like, let's say somebody is just starting to think ahead and, they want to become prepared in small ways now. Not like an all at once, just, as they can with their budget. Like, what would be a good starting point? Should they begin stockpiling different types of food in increments? Should they have a pantry? Should they have some backup power? Should they have a water filtration system? That kind of thing. What would the first steps be for somebody who's starting this brand new? Sure. So let's talk about some of the just kind of a general answer and then a more specific one. Because, if you're diabetic, that's going to change, obviously. If you have family members that have special needs, that's going to change. But so let's talk in general terms where I would start. I get hired by people all over the country. One of my last clients was on Capitol Hill. They live 2 blocks, from the U.S. Capitol, and wanted to know, hey, what can I do to be prepared? And, I open their refrigerator and, they eat out all the time. So they've got, like, I don't know, maybe a gallon of milk in there and maybe some microwave meals, and that's it. So as a general answer to that, what I would say is, you kind of have to look at, again, those needs: food, water, shelter, protection, and look at what you already have and go from there. Generally speaking, as a rule of survival, there's kind of this thing called the rule of threes. You can survive about 3 minutes without oxygen. You can survive about 3 days without water, and you can survive about 3 weeks without food.
Now, again, depending on the time of year, if it's wintertime and you're freezing, you're not going to last long outside, obviously, if you don't have shelter. So that is a big one as well. But if I was just starting from scratch and I said, okay, what is the most important need that I can cover around here? Because most of us have, clothes for the weather and things like that. I would start with some sort of good water filtration system. You can go to Walmart and you can get, there's a couple of different filters you can get. There's something called the Lifestraw that's like $20. Mm-hmm. You can get, there's another one out there. I can't think of the company right now, but again, there's on the shelves at Walmart there. They're basically water filters that they don't filter out things like gasoline, chemicals, things like that. But if you've got a water supply nearby, let's say it's a creek or a pond or something like that, you have to be able to filter that out, because if you can't boil it and you need to drink, you can't just drink it straight out of any creek around here, or even some of the cleaner ones out there, because they can get contaminated. So there's one called the Katahdin Pocket Microfilter. If you go online, there's a few companies like Lifestraw that make gray water filters. They're not that expensive. Like I said, Walmart, you can get it for $20 just as a start. And then if you want to get more expensive models later on, you can. But that's where I would start with water. With food, I think that's pretty easy myself. I've got a family of 5. They eat like crazy. So what we do is we do have long-term storage food. There's a company called Thrive that has great freeze-dried food. So they're fantastic if you're looking for long-term storage, but it's kind of expensive. So if you're talking about, I think you kind of mentioned, like, if I've got a budget and I don't have a lot, just go and buy some of the stuff that you normally eat. Go and buy a little bit more pasta, a little more sauce, some more rice, canned goods. So whatever you normally eat, just go buy 2 weeks worth of it and then put it aside. If an emergency comes, you can use it, or if you're running short, you can use it. But just to have that stuff there, again, as a start. Those are really simple, really easy things you can do. But we can't ignore protection. We can't ignore that part of it, because again, I have to go back to history. Every single major disaster, major catastrophic event that's happened in the last 20 years, there's always a breakdown of order. And really, we don't need an event, okay, because obviously right now with the things that are going on socially in our country, there's all kinds of unrest. And so you can look at any of those situations, and there's always, always, always an interruption in emergency resources. Okay. Sometimes it's just financially. And so you've got to have a way to protect yourself. You've got to have a way to protect your family. That's why the Second Amendment exists. Hey, if you've got a baseball bat, great. Hey, if you've got a German Shepherd, that's great too. But if somebody comes at you with lethal force, a knife, a baseball bat, or if they have a gun, there's only going to be one way that you're going to be able to defend against that. And again, if the police can't come right away, police are reactionary, right? They're mostly coming after the crime has taken place. Usually they're not there to be able to stop the crime from happening. And so I would say, Rachel, one of the biggest things is, I think, a mental understanding that it's not my neighbor Joe's responsibility to protect my family.
Right.
It's not the police's job necessarily if they're not there to protect my family. It's my job, and it's my wife's job. We have young kids. I know you guys have kids as well. And so the question is, can I protect my family if these things are happening? And so if the answer is no, then again, there's some easy steps. Anybody can buy pepper spray. Most states, taser type guns, stun guns are legal. But at the end of the day, again, as a former law enforcement officer, I highly recommend, if you've never fired a gun, you obviously should get some training. You need to do some research, but that's the only way you're going to be able to defend yourself if somebody brings lethal threats against you.
Yeah, we're big weapons on this podcast. We did a whole episode on 2A, and how important it is and why it's in our Constitution, and all the Bill of Rights and all. But
they frisked me actually when I came into the studio, or maybe they didn't.
We assume you're carrying, so we're just.
You assume correctly.
Yeah. So this is a safe house right now. But and Rosie, this is where Rosie's missing out, because he loves that part of it. He's quite the collector. Although he lost them all in a boating accident, I was really sad. Just like a week ago. Really sad. Yeah.
What?
So all of his guns were lost in a boating accident. It's terrible. Yeah, I know. So Anyways, there's a few people that know what that means listening. Hey, you gave me a verse out of Ezekiel. I want to read it real quick. And this is kind of, this actually ties in well with even kind of the realm of our podcast, that we find ourselves in, like the niche of the internet podcast world. But it comes out of Ezekiel chapter 33, and it's 1-7. It says, "Once again, a message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, give your people this message. When I bring an army against a country, the people of that land choose one of their own to be a watchman. When the watchman sees the enemy coming, he sounds the alarm to warn the people. Then if those who hear the alarm refuse to take action, it is their own fault if they die. They heard the alarm, but they ignored it, so the responsibility is theirs. If they had listened to the warning, they could have saved their lives. But if the watchman sees the enemy coming and doesn't sound the alarm to warn the people, he is responsible for their captivity. They will die in their sins, but I will hold the watchman responsible for their deaths." So some version, this is the NLT, that's what I've been reading lately, but I think other ones say their blood is on your head. It's a pretty strong warning from God in reference to a watchman. And a lot of people that have podcasts, truthers and conspiracies, they consider themselves watchmen. At least the Christian communities within this realm, we call ourselves watchers or watchmen on the wall, trying to warn people of what we see happening based on history and signs on the wall and all those other things that are coming forward. So that's kind of how you view yourself in this whole thing, with what you're doing, right?
Yeah. My calling sort of was revealed not at one time, really. It was over a series of years. I actually went to school. My degree is in Christian ministries. I felt called into some sort of ministry, didn't know what at the time. My wife thought she was marrying a pastor, a youth pastor. And then when she found out about the watchman calling, it was kind of a wake-up call for her. But I joke about it, but in all seriousness, I do believe that my ministerial background gave me a firm foundation for this watchman calling. But basically what I believe it is, very simply put again, is my calling is to warn people of, again, two things. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're responsible now. Okay. So here it is. You need to be ready for eternity, and you need to be ready for the things that are coming. Maybe not necessarily the whole world. Maybe Jesus isn't coming back yet. Maybe he's not coming back for 200 years. Maybe. But what I am saying is, if you're living in America right now and you're a Christian, things are definitely changing. I mean, you don't have to look far to see that. And so as a watchman, I believe it's my job to put the warning out there.
Yeah.
And to be honest, again, this is the first interview that I've done since the whole Corona thing happened. I put a couple posts out, and then that was it. I was very silent. I was led by the Lord to be silent for about 90 days, because it's kind of like at that point, it's like, I told you so. I've been talking about preparedness for years and years and years, so when the coronavirus, when everything started, I kind of felt like God was saying, hey, you've been telling for years, now sit back and it's time to survive. And it's been very interesting how things have sort of unfolded. But again, just to go back to those verses, I feel called to let people know they've got to be ready for eternity, and they've got to be ready for the things that are coming out there. And unfortunately, I have 3 kids, and I hate to say this, but I don't believe that we as a nation are sort of at our height or on the way sort of up still. Like, I kind of see that we're going the way of Rome, and I kind of sadly see sort of the twilight of this nation. And I hate to say that. I mean, I grew up, during the Cold War, and at a time where I feel like there was a lot more patriotism and a lot more love for this nation. And now if you've ever seen the movie, The Sound of Music, that the scene at the end where they're singing Edelweiss. Yeah. You like that? You like that scene? So yeah, we're watching it right now. Like, we're in the middle of watching it, and oh my goodness, the feels like just, you don't see that kind of patriotism anymore. And I think that's what really stands out so much as a unifying factor between the main protagonists. But anyway, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Right. So that scene when they sing Edelweiss at the end of the movie, am I saying that right? Edelweiss or Edelweiss?
Be careful how you say
right.
that.
Okay. but they're basically, you know, the main character, and that's a true story. He is literally singing the national anthem of his homeland for the last time before he has to leave his homeland. And I got to be honest, every time I hear the national anthem being sung, I get sad because I don't feel like there's a sense of pride necessarily anymore.
Right.
I feel like it's almost that time is almost past. And again, I hope I'm wrong. Please,
right.
God, let me be wrong.
Yeah.
But again, at the same time, in case it is going that way, what I do foresee, I think our children are going to have it a lot harder than we have had it. I think they're going to deal with things that, and so I'm trying to train my children up to, to be able to defend themselves. Most importantly, of course, to know their word, to be founded in their faith. But I am concerned for them. I know the Lord will take care of them, absolutely, but I'm concerned for maybe some of the things that they might go through.
Yeah. So this brings me to a question too that was asked of me last week by the same couple that was concerned about, prepping. Is it right? Is it wrong? Whatever. And the question that he asked me was, what do I do when people come to my house and they're looking for help? And I actually used the Genesis 41 story with him, not realizing that you had told him that story that you were sharing, and because he told me that you told him that story, that same verse, which is kind of cool. I think the Lord was orchestrating something there.
Totally a God thing.
But I said, what you might want to do is, as you're preparing, you need to set aside some for other people, and that's your generous gift. But like you said, my neighbor isn't responsible for me, and I'm not responsible for my neighbor. I can help them if I can, and if I can't, I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us to give all of our food away to people in need. That's never a command. And in fact, what you said, your job and my job, especially as husband and men, are to first provide and protect for our families. Like, that's the mandate from God and Scripture for godly men, is to protect and provide as best that they can. And so that's my first, and should be everyone's first, is their immediate family, protection and provision. But the neighbor that comes that needs it, yes, absolutely you can. So I think wisdom would be set some aside, almost like just a portion. And, over time that can grow if the Lord should not bring some crazy calamity, where you have need of it.
So we are called to be salt and light to this world. And think about it, when things are going bad and somebody needs their basic needs fulfilled and we reach out and help them, what does that automatically do? It automatically opens up the ability for us to share the gospel as well.
Yeah.
And so, I absolutely look at that as part of my preparedness. And so I think about this. Every single person that is going to hear this podcast has the ability to choose. They're going to be prepared or they're not. If they are prepared and they are believers, they're going to be able, again, to help their neighbors to spread the gospel. And so, double-edged sword there. And so, and I don't think this is happening for no reason. I think it's great you guys are doing this, and that's how I would look at it. In reality, when you say, when somebody comes to my house, if things get real bad, I'll be long gone. I'll be in a bunker somewhere. But I'll leave some stuff for those looking for supplies.
Leave some little little trail of trail mix or something, on the counter. Yeah.
Hey, can I ask a question, Rachel? Is that all right?
Yes, totally.
So I just want to ask from, so Turner just mentioned, as guys, we feel like we have to be the protectors of our families and things like that. But let me ask your perspective as a mom. You guys have what, 2 kids now or just 1?
Yes, we have 2 kids.
Okay.
They're almost 4 and almost 2.
Okay. So only reason I'm asking is because I get this question a lot from women all over the country, and I really try to help out as best I can. But let me ask you, with everything going on right now, everything you see going on in the world, do you feel prepared to kind of protect your family? And if not, like what kind of things do you think you need, if you don't mind my asking? Again, just to see sort of out there, because I do know a lot of folks. Yes, the guys who get their guns and their training and stuff like that. But I've actually seen most of the people that I train for firearms training are children and women. So just wanted to get your perspective on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So currently with everything going on, like there's been a lot of stuff that's been on my radar since last fall. And so some things actually weren't a surprise when they started happening. And there were definitely things that I was talking to my husband about, like, listen, you know, these different emergency, states of emergency are going to be coming down, which means these different things for our freedoms and these different things that we'll have to be aware of if people want to start pushing boundaries that we already have set up. So for me, like, I always had an urgency about what was going on, sometimes even more so than my husband. My husband was like, you know, everything's okay, it's all good. But then, like, as things started to happen and unfold for him, he and I were more and more on the same page. Like, okay, we do need to start talking about it. It's not just me being super pessimistic. It's like, we actually do need to start talking about these things and preparing for them. So, like, we definitely are prepared for protection, but we would really like to ramp that up a little bit. We'd also love to just keep skilled being able to protect ourselves and our family. We're currently in an RV and we're preparing ourselves to be able to take that wherever. We're living in it 100%, but there's different things that I'm realizing. We are still very dependent on a normal, you know, American chain of needs, where we're still going to the grocery store every couple days and we don't really have a ton of space to be stocked up. But I feel myself very blessed that, like, I grew up in a home where we made so much from scratch, and we also were frugal, and we thought about, you know, how long is this going to last, and how can we be prepared, and how can we be thinking about budgets and, you know, stretching our goods. And so that's something that me and my husband have wanted to work at better, is just thinking ahead in our small space. But yeah, like, I still, at the back of my mind, I'm like, we're still not prepared enough, because if all of a sudden our power supply was cut, you know, we wouldn't have a generator, we wouldn't have this, we wouldn't have this. So there's things that I'm making this mental list right now, and I'm definitely, like, learning as I go. You know, it's so nice having the resource of the internet, but if I was just talking to my dad about this today, if all of a sudden we have a complete blackout of all kind of service and everything like that, like, I would have to learn so much from books, and I would have to learn so much from people who are in a better place to be self-sufficient in that way. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't feel 100% prepared, but I have a vague idea of the steps that I would need to at least begin. And so it's so helpful to talk to somebody who does this professionally. And I think that that's definitely something that I would want to find locally too, who can teach me step by step.
Wonderful. Thanks for your honesty. And so the reason I asked it is because you seem like such a normal person. You seem like a normal family. And, you know, there's a lot of normal people out there that are feeling the same way you do right now, and feeling like, hey, I need to start at least looking at these things. And so, interestingly enough, so when we did the Netflix show Dark Tourist, the hosts are from New Zealand, and you know, they kind of came up here almost with it felt like almost with a mission to kind of show how crazy we are. And it's very interesting because at the beginning of the show, at the end of the show, you know, the host kind of looked at Holly and I and said, "You guys are really not what I expected. You really seem," and I said, "Normal?" And he says, "Yes." And, you know, here's the guy. We spent, you know, a whole day or two with him, shared the gospel with him. And then at the end, again, he's like, you know, I really enjoyed my time here. And, you know, these people aren't really crazy. And, you know, he wasn't necessarily convinced of his need to be prepared necessarily, but it was just interesting in that, you know, before he just had this image in his mind. And sadly, I'm so glad there's podcasts out here like this one, because, you know, I'll be honest. I don't even know where to get my news anymore because, you know, every day it changes. One news program is saying one thing about COVID, one news program saying another thing. I think one of you mentioned the shortage of coins recently. I actually, my personal experience, I was dealing with a business that sent an email and said, hey, if you're coming to pay with cash, make sure you have exact change. And I was like, well, that's kind of odd. Why would you ask that? And they specifically said the banks aren't giving us change. And so instead of going, and I know this is what all of us do, right? We go to Google and we start looking stuff up, and I didn't do that. I went on social media and said, hey, I heard this story. What are you guys experiencing? And I heard from people across the country saying yes.
I saw that post.
Yeah.
I almost chimed in, but you know, I didn't want to give my 2 cents worth.
I like that. That was good.
The bank took it. They would.
That's right. So, but anyway, so the other thing I would say is, be careful where you get your information from.
Yeah.
Let me mention, can I mention a couple of reliable sources, some things that I would say your listeners definitely, so a couple folks, Practical Preppers, practicalpreppers.com, a guy named Scott Hunt. He was actually the guy on Nat Geo that gave out the scores, like for the different people that were on it. But he is amazing. He's been prepping for a long time, has a lot of he's on YouTube, and he's also obviously his website's there. But he's got a lot of practical stuff, from everything from you want to add a hand pump to your well, to solar, to protection. I mean, just all across the board of preparedness. He's great. Another local one, we're kind of in the, can I say where we are, or is that
Yeah, sure.
Generally, so we're in the DC metro area.
Yeah, that's fine.
So there's a guy out here, Tim McWelch, fantastic. He's a New York Times best-selling author, a friend of mine that does advanced survival training. You literally can go out to you can go out to his property. He'll take you out for like 2 days in the woods. You can learn like what plants you can eat, stuff like that. There's another one around here called Fortitude Ranch. A buddy of mine named Dave helps to run that place. So there's definitely some great resources out there. And I can, if anybody needs more, I can name some more. I can give, recommendations on products and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely just be careful where you're getting your information from. Obviously a lot of folks out there have, they're going to have their different biases and their different perspectives on things. We're the folks I'm mentioning and myself, always doing it, from that Christian perspective.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw those out there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. So maybe you need to have your own podcast, man.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. I can help you with that. So let's start with a super simple first step. Like, say I live in a neighborhood. It's cookie cutter homes. They all look the same, like a quarter acre lot, whatever it is. And what if I wanted a garden? So just start with a basic garden. Like, how big of a garden for a family of, say, 4? How big of a garden does a person need to have to get some fresh veggies and keep it,
Sure. So first of all, because of Adam, gardening is not easy.
I know. I hate it.
It's really easy to grow weeds.
Yes.
It's difficult to grow.
Wait, did you say weed?
Smoking that sticky green stuff.
We fit that into every episode.
Nice.
So.
It's easy to grow weeds. It's difficult to grow. It's more difficult to grow stuff that you're going to eat. So there's a group out there, and I'll have to get this back for your readers. I'm trying to think of it right now. Oh, Secrets to a Survival Garden. I'm trying to think of the author right now, but that's one resource you can go to, and he will teach you how to grow a garden that kind of looks like it's weeds, but it's actually survival foods and stuff like that.
Cool.
And yeah, so to go through gardening, that's not actually a simple one. That's a more difficult one. But with stuff like Miracle Grow out there now, what I would recommend is, looking at the property that you have, determining how much, you can actually use for that. Mm-hmm. Basically, the kind of the thought that I've heard out there, the teaching out there is, if you have 1 full acre of land that you can cultivate, you can grow all the food you need for 1 year.
Wow.
Okay.
So just portion it off. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you didn't have a full acre, so let's say you had 1/4 of an acre and your house takes up some of that, so then you're left with 1/8 of an acre. 1/8 of an acre, if you do it right, is actually enough to grow enough food to get you through, I would say, at least till you can get more. And the survival supplies, the thought behind preparedness is, I just need to have enough till I can get more, till I can grow more, till I can buy more, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what are you comfortable with? You know, for me, I like to have at least 6 months of food. I just, for my family, my growing family, I feel like that's a good amount for me. And you think, well, that's a lot of food. But really, it doesn't take up that much space when you start doing the research and things like that. But to answer your question about the gardening part of it, a little more difficult because gardening takes a little bit more of a green thumb. But that's just a matter of putting the space out there, you know, learning and really learning when to plant the stuff. We have our own garden. Every year we plant one. We have fruit-bearing trees and things like that. So I would say you have to do the research for your area specifically because there's different plants that are going to grow better in different areas.
Yeah.
So.
Rachel could grow armadillos, evidently, and black bears. Hey, so sorry, I had to throw that in there. The guy that's thinking about buying, 50 acres or 100 acres in Wyoming and then throwing down some shipping containers to turn into houses, digging a well and throwing solar on top, that's all possible too, right? Maybe a couple cattle, so you can have some beef, maybe some sheep, and then...
So for me personally, because I live on the East Coast, Wyoming is a little bit far to get to in an emergency situation. But yes, I think it's very possible. I mean, my wife and I right now are talking about, we're looking at different pieces of land and talking about how to save up for things like that. I
call it a homestead.
A homestead is a great way to put it. Really, for me, in my survival planning, there's always a backup.
Right.
There's always somewhere else to go. And as long as in your plan, you don't necessarily have to have the 50 acres, but if you know someone that does,
right,
and they're willing to take you on.
Yeah.
So we all have skills, right? Let's say, some people have medical skills, some people have the, firearm skills, whatever it is, we all have something. And so what do you bring to the table? So like, kind of to answer your question, we have a network of people. We've got like, nurses and we've got people in the medical field, and then we have former law enforcement, former military, and then we have one guy that has a big piece of property. And so we've kind of come together and said, okay, we'll share our resources. I'm not going to come empty handed. I'm going to bring this to the table. And so like in our group,
like a network of community.
Exactly. Yeah. And so everybody has to bring something to the table. And so I don't necessarily have to have the 50 acres if someone else in the group does, but then I've got to be willing to bring, X, Y, Z to the table. So it is definitely possible. Sometimes it's possible on your own if through your own resources. Sometimes it's going to be possible through networking. Yeah. That's a huge thing for survival. Because in reality, the area that you're in might become compromised. I mean, God forbid if, haven't had nukes go off since World War II, but I mean, Washington, D.C., we're close enough that if something were to happen like that, we're going to have to get out of the area.
Right.
And so do you have somewhere to go that's 100 miles away? Mm-hmm. Do you have somewhere to go that's 200 miles away? And so you have those things built into your planning. When I go to consult with people, like I mentioned, the couple on Capitol Hill and other folks, had a family in Pittsburgh that wanted me to help them come up with a plan for their 200-acre property. I always start with basically an evaluation. I look at, again, the basic needs, food, water, shelter, protection, see where they are, see what their goals are, and then we come up with a plan. And so the best thing you can do is to evaluate. This goes back to everything, whether it's the garden, the food, the water. Look at what you have right now as, when you're looking at food, water, shelter, and protection. Set your goals and then figure out what you need to do to get there. Because the best thing you do is come up with a plan. And one of the biggest aspects of your plan is communication. Because if the cell phones go down, if the interweb goes down, how are you going to get in touch with your loved ones? And so in our plan, we have locations already built in. So, okay, if I can't reach you, we'll go to this spot. Yeah. And then if I go there and you're not there, then I go to the next spot. And so we have these things built in as part of that plan.
Yeah. So in my network, my particular skill that I bring to the table is just incredible good looks and brains. So that's what I bring to my network of survivors.
For your group then.
Yes. We'll die the most beautiful group you will ever see. But no, I actually, Rachel's laughing. I was joking because I actually had this discussion with a group of guys, and some of these guys. We've all been in the same circles, and I was like, I don't bring anything. I'm like the dude that knows the Bible a little bit, but we'll need that. And they're like, all right, you can be the chaplain of our little survival militia group or whatever you want to call it. I didn't even have a name, but I was like, okay, as long as you carve out a spot for me, well, cool. And I'll work hard, man. I will work hard. I'm a hard worker.
You joke about that, but when people are falling apart, when
the
world is falling apart, people need spiritual guidance.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, I know you're joking about it, but at the same time,
right.
That's a huge thing. That is a huge thing. And some people will not get through a situation without that spiritual guidance. And so that's actually a huge talent to bring, to the pool there. But again, we don't, for us, the bottom line is, if you don't have a skill you're going to bring, then go learn something. I don't care what it is. Learn how to sew. Learn the medical part. Learn how to take care of animals. That's a big thing, right?
Right.
If you're really going to be self-reliant. So
it's a medical training.
So we'll look at the holes in our group and say, okay, here's what we need. What are you willing to do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll learn how to use a ham radio. Perfect. And so you can look at those things, and you can, though you don't bring it, you can learn it.
That's right. That's right. So one of the things I always used when I was a youth pastor back in the day, one of the things, and I've tried to instill this in my kids too a little bit, is the best way out of a difficult situation is to know ahead of time what you're going to do if you're ever in that situation. And that's essentially, I would apply that to like, hey, if you're ever presented with the opportunity to take drugs, or if you're with, a chick and she, and you guys are getting hot and heavy, you got to know how you're going to handle that, as youth. But that same application, it fits perfectly with what we're talking about here, is knowing ahead of time what your plan is when you're faced with the situation. And that's 90% of reaching success through a difficult situation. Because if you don't have a plan, your plan has been made, and that's failure. Mm-hmm. That's, what is that saying? A plan of, of course I'm going to follow
If you fail to plan.
You plan to fail.
Right.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Thank you. But so yeah, I mean, it's just general wisdom, and it's common sense. It's not even like something special. It's just general wisdom and common sense. But yeah. So here's the deal. We've been talking for about an hour. You have a great story, by the way. Like, cool history of stuff, television, law enforcement, and all that. That's really cool. Okay, last question. What's your favorite firearm? Just out of curiosity.
I can't answer that just generally, because what's
many.
What's the situation?
All right. Let's start this way. What's your favorite handgun first?
Okay, Glock. I'm a Glock man.
Are you a Glock guy?
I'm a Glock man.
Okay.
There's great guns out there. Look, I teach firearms. I'm one of those guys that says, listen, if you know how to, the best gun that you can have is the one you know how to use. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So generally speaking, that's my answer. But I'm a Glock guy only because, and I've been issued all kinds of different weapons, Glocks, time and again, tried and true. I've had them completely submerged in water on a canoe trip. Took it out, cleaned it, fired it. I'm just a Glock guy.
You cleaned it. That's a miracle. Most people don't even clean their Glocks.
Right. And they're easy to use. I mean, they're kind of idiot proof. You load it, you point and shoot. So pistol wise, I'm a Glock guy, but again, there's a lot of great guns out there.
Yeah.
So that's my pistol. So what's the
all right, shotgun?
Shotgun, Remington 870 every time. A little bit partial to it because I had one in my cruiser, and I know I can take it apart myself, and I can add the tactical stuff to it. And I like the fact that the slide release is on the trigger guard instead of on the top, Mossberg. So if Mossberg, anybody out there, any listeners can change that. I prefer the Remington 870. There's just nothing like the sound of that
I know,
that gun cocking, and then again you can put the slide carrier, the shell carrier on the side, and you automatically have a bunch of rounds. So Remington 870.
Cool. Okay, long gun.
Long gun. I mean, I'm not going to say a specific brand. I mean, M4 every time. 5.56 223.
Yeah.
Particularly, my personal one is a Daniel Defense. I love how light it is. But a lot of good guns out there. But I like my Daniel. with the Trigicon MRO on top and the magnifier. And
some people are
stuff.
lost right now. They're totally like, what do you say? What's a Trigicon? Yeah. All right. That's cool. I was just curious.
Yeah. But I tell you, the round right now, the gun right now, that if you can only have one gun, Ruger 1022. It is easy to shoot. It can take 30 round magazines, and 22 rounds are still so cheap.
Yeah.
And you can carry, hundreds of them, thousands of them.
It does the job.
And it, for the most part, are you going to take a bear down with a 22? No, you're not. But you could use it if you had to for self-defense. You could use it for small game. So if I only had one gun, that's probably what I would choose.
Yeah, you can hunt with them and everything. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I'm so glad you came out onto the podcast with us, and maybe we'll explore some future episodes where we can dive deeper into specifics of prepping or something like that, if you're interested in that. But we're going to put all of Jay's contact info on the show notes, so anybody can reach out to him. In primarily, I would suggest Facebook, but also I would suggest reading his book, checking out Netflix, and seeing if you can watch some of the older episodes of Doomsday Prepper. I think they're probably on Netflix too, streaming.
They are. Yeah, it's a season 2, episode 3.
Okay.
Is the one we're on.
Cool. All right. So there you go. So go check out Jason, and you can see what they've been up to. One last question. This was on my mind, and Rachel, you kind of like got there a little bit. What about was your wife on board with this? Was it her idea? Was it your idea? Was it something you guys came together at the same time and kind of realized together, like an epiphany, or was it like how did that play out? I know she's in the room here, so I don't want to put you on a spot, but
so I have to tell the truth. Is that what you're saying?
You do.
So, like in many aspects of our marriage, God is first, and we're imperfect people, and so we try to follow him as best we can. And this was one of those areas where I felt strongly the Lord was leading me in, and I really don't. If she's my partner, I don't do anything without asking her, without running it through her, because it's our family. And so I wouldn't say that. I would say that I probably was the catalyst, feeling led by the Lord, but she's been very, very supportive. Sometimes I think she's humoring me, but at other times, she'll come to me and say, I'm looking at what's going on in this country, and I just don't know what's going to happen. And so I feel I'm very thankful that we have done what we have done and that we can help other people. So to answer your question, it's definitely been a partnership, but I would say probably more so, I would say led by me.
Okay, cool. So she realized if she wanted to survive the zombie apocalypse that she should probably hitch her trailer to you. And
yes, because she knows that she can beat me in a foot race, and so she doesn't have to be the fastest.
That's right.
She just have to not be the slowest.
Not
right?
be the slowest, right? Yeah. So. I know. Anyways, I was going to say this podcast was born out of The Walking Dead. We used to gather and watch The Walking Dead on Sunday nights. Yeah, I know, you can read about it on our website. But and we started just having conversations during the commercials, and then we just said we should be recording these. Are fun, and then we just made a podcast. But it was because of The Walking Dead. There's something about apocalyptic end of the world scenarios that you just can't avoid. They're everywhere. Every movie. It's almost like like they're even making like romantic comedies about it now.
Sure.
So it just seems like if predictive programming is correct, then we're going to end up in a scenario at some point, unless the Lord should rapture the church, which I'm hopeful for. I hope for it, but here's the thing. You prepare for the worst. Like, Jesus promised tribulation. Mm-hmm. He didn't promise that we would be the tribulation, but tribulation will come upon many in the last days, and it will be a difficult time. So anyways, hey man, thanks so much for coming in, and maybe we'll have you back again soon, and you can keep and as I said before, all of our listeners, you can check him out. We'll put the links in our show notes, and I would encourage you, if you have questions, to reach out. He's a great guy, and very experienced, and a guy that I would trust for this type of advice. So
thank you very much. Just want to say all glory to God. It's all him.
Amen. That's right. Rach, you good?
Yeah, this has been awesome. I have so many questions. I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I'm going to delve into all those awesome resources that you guys have.
I'll tell you what, let me say one more thing. If you have any questions or if your listeners have any questions, start sending them in, and maybe we could set up another program where we can go through their questions and answer.
That'd be cool. Yeah, a little Q&A time. That'd be fun. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you next time on All Out War. As Rosie always. Oh, by the way, Rosie, get back in here. We miss you, man. And as he always says, what does he say? Stay thirsty. What does he say? Stay hydrated. Stay hydrated. So, all right. See you guys.
Thanks for listening to the All Out War podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you next time.